So good afternoon. It's quite difficult to start any kind of panel after the lunch, but but we have to. So welcome on the panel, and I would like to express my appreciation to the organizers to giving me an opportunity to moderate on this really interesting panel, where we have to discuss the issues of disinformation and fake news and lies, which makes a great difference and great gap between the reality and the perception of reality within the public, within this general public. And from my point of view, I'd like to mention a few topics about what we have, because I'm the representative of media and the public broadcaster here, and this is kind of quite a serious challenge for the public broadcasters, not just in this country, but all around the world, that public broadcasters to somehow to fight this disinformation, the fake news, and so on, and to engage with the society much closer than it is today. When we have actually the serious growth of trust and actually the decrease of trust between the society and the media and journalists and so on. So one issue which I'd like to mention is the kind of the media's role in the writing of the gap between the society, between the reality and the perception of reality. In my point of view, this is seriously based on the media's approach. How do they present the reality? Mostly the mainstream media today, and because if they are keen on the kind of negative information, negative news, and so on, they are presenting the reality that the reality is quite bad. And all the societies, they understand the reality as the bad picture, but as in reality, really, it's quite differs, because the reality has the both sides of the bad and good sides. So and when we are accepting the good news or good stories out of our news flow or something like that, I'm talking about the media, we are giving the society the picture just from the one side, just from the bad side, and they can't understand what is happening on the other side and how to realize, and that makes the serious effect on their behavior. Finally, we are getting the nihilistic approaches all around the world when the people are not coming on elections, when they are not involving in the political processes, or even worse, they are behaving against the established rules and established political circumstances, actually. And so finally, we are getting really very let's call this ultra groups from the very different sides, ultra left or ultra right. But we are getting the people who are actually against all what has been established for the decades since the World War II. And this is the kind of my point of view, that this is kind of responsibility of the mainstream media, that we have this kind of approach from the society. I mean, I'm not talking about that this is just the responsibility of the media, but I'm talking about the part of the responsibility which is based on the media and which is the crucial for understanding what we have to do for our future. So now I will end my brief intro to our panel, and I'll give the floor to our panelists, and I would like to ask to Elina Lange-Ionatamishvili, who is the senior expert of the Doctrine, Concept and Experimentation branch at the NATO Stratcom, COE, to talk about and share with us the ideas. And I know that she's talking about the psychological aspects of the disinformation, how they affect our memories, how they affect our minds, and what shall be done. Please.
Yes, thank you very much.
You have about 10 minutes, each of you. So.
Yes, so thank you very much for the introduction, and it's great to be back in Georgia, the only country in the world that can actually correctly pronounce my surname, so it's always a pleasure. What I'd like to talk to you about today is two things. What is it that makes disinformation to have continued influence effect on our perception? And also, what does it mean for government communications in a digital age, in a democracy? So, in cognitive psychology, and more specifically in memory research, there are two dominant approaches that try to explain continued influence of disinformation. So first one relates to mental event models. So it is argued that as an event unfolds, we are building event models mentally in our brain, in our memory. And of course, this model consists of some key elements or key pieces of information. So the first information that we encounter, that actually is the one that gets encoded first in our memory. And it is also proved that we as humans are very reluctant to dismiss these key elements or these key parts of information or to recode them, even when we are told that this information that we have is false. That is because we think it's easy, but in fact for our brain it's not. It actually takes very big effort to decode and re-encode information in our memory. And sometimes it's also related to lack of plausible alternative information. So our brain actually prefers to stick to false information rather than to admit that it has no information at all, that there is an information void. So, for example, in criminal proceedings, when, for example, the accused person is then claimed to be innocent, but no alternative suspect is presented, we are very likely to continue perceiving this now supposedly innocent person as still guilty because we just don't have another suspect. The second approach relates to the dual process theory. So basically it talks about how valid and invalid information competes in our memory for automatic activation. And obviously the dominant mode of thinking is intuitive thinking, which means that we are making decisions, especially when we are pressed for time, we are making decisions intuitively without deliberating about the original source where we encountered this information or the context where we memorized this information. And I think especially in the digital age, this pressure for information, pressure for time is very prevalent. Another thing that we must consider is that repetition enhances belief in the truthfulness of repeated assertions. So especially that is true when there is temporal spacing. So if things are repeated after a certain period of time again and again, and also different contexts, so that we encounter this information in different contexts. And repeated disinformation is much harder to retract. So I guess the question for us is, should we simply fight repetitive disinformation with repetitive corrected information? And that might be great if that worked, but actually experiments show that this is not really the case. Unfortunately, by repeating disinformation with the attempt to retract it, we can even enhance the impact of disinformation further. But to be fair, these experiments mainly concerned political beliefs and judicial settings. So what can we derive from this for our panel? So I think that this digital age and peer-to-peer trust-based communication on social media, it has opened unprecedented opportunities for both the disinformers and the informers. And social media platforms and internet these days remain largely unregulated, and still it is a very big debate whether and to what extent we should, or it would be acceptable to regulate them so as not to impede on human rights. But if we come back to cognitive psychology and the effects of repeated disinformation, then I think there are two things that should be of particular concern to us. First is inauthentic organized behavior on social media, and by that I mean bot networks or organic campaigns that imitate real user behavior by often using fake identities. And second is information laundering online. So that is a larger process that through variation of techniques enables not only placement of disinformation in the public discourse, but also allows for seemingly organic referencing of different sources, dissemination through a variety of sources and in different contexts, and also amplification. So all of that is enhancing the encoding of disinformation in our memory and its continued influence. And we as democracies, of course, have set our standards and rules that we must and we do follow, so we cannot and we should not employ the same methods for promoting our story as our adversaries are for promoting all sorts of disinformation in our information space. So just 4 lessons that I think we can learn from this. First one, I think it's time that we admit to ourselves that we have not done very well by deciding that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have won the argument and that we do not have to argue the democratic liberal idea to our audiences that have known worse. By this we have created a certain information void, I think, and therefore the second lesson is that we have to be first out there with our message and repeat, repeat, repeat in different contexts and not in a format of campaigns that we normally do, but it has to be continuous. The third one, if you want to correct disinformation, do it by all means, but do not expect that this will help tremendously. Research also shows that the communities that follow conspiracy theory pages, for example, they do not actually engage with the pages of fact checkers. So this overlap is really minimal. And I think it's probably people like you and me who just want to follow what both sides are doing and are analyzing it. And the last one, I think we really have to discuss regulation of social media platforms to ensure more transparency, whilst at the same time safeguarding human rights for those voices for whom the freedom of the internet and social media might be the only guarantor of freedom of expression and safe expression of their opinions. So I hope I fit in my 10 minutes and
even less.
great, so more time for you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Elena. And we'll move to another panelist, Iya Meurmishvili, senior editor, TV anchor, and a journalist of the Voice of America, Georgian branch, actually. And she will share with us the ideas about the speed of spreading of the disinformation and why that happens. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Georgi, and thank you, organizers. They told me to take my earring off, but I did not listen. It's an honor to be here and to be talking about this very important topic that relates so closely to what you and I do. We're both journalists, basically. Disinformation, and to avoid some duplication, because some of the previous panelists spoke about it, I would not repeat some of the things that I agree with them on, but to give the perspective of a journalist on disinformation, that's what I will concentrate on. Disinformation, propaganda, fake news is nothing new. We've encountered this phenomena for a long time, for as long as politics and the actors that want to influence societies exist in the world. But something changed, and that change is making this phenomena, all of them, very, very dangerous. And it's the speed and its technological development, social media, and the way society consumes news. The speed of consumption of news has never been this great. And now why is that important? Because as Elena said, you can repeat and debunk all you want, but it does not resonate with people because the initial impact was already made with this information. And of course, it's important to fact check certain statements, especially from the government, from the journalist perspective, from the government officials' statements, but to change the impact that the fake news had on a part of the society or community is extremely difficult because you're not accessing the same people through the same channels that they received that information. So I also worked on polygraph.info. It's a fact-checking resource that mainly concentrates on the government officials' statements and how true they are staying to the fact. So I'm sure we did a good job, but I don't think we changed anyone's mind about what they thought about a given thing based on the fake news. So to give you and I will just step back from the state-organized disinformation and propaganda, but just to demonstrate how impactful fake news could be. There were 9 lynchings in Indonesia because of fake news, because somebody on Facebook said that there was based on the kidnappings were conducted by certain types of people, and in certain communities they found these types of people and they just lynched them. In Sri Lanka, a man was burnt alive because there was also on Facebook, or WhatsApp, there was a group messaging saying that Muslim shop holders are selling the pills to the opposite community, to the Buddhist community, for them not to have children. I forget the word that I wanted to use, but and that caused outrage in the society. And it's all fake news. None of this really existed. But like starting from the human tragedy that fake news can cause, such as these awful tragedies, ending with the changing minds of larger communities, whether it's a small group of people or a town or a country. It's incredible, the impact and the speed by which the fake news disseminates and how it resonates with people because of what you were saying, how we consume the news and digest news. So to give you a bit of statistics, I won't bore you with this, but falsehoods spread significantly faster, much deeper, in broader ways than the truth does. Oxford University conducted a study not too long ago, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, which indicates that the study found evidence of organized social media manipulation campaigns in 70 countries. And we're talking about political actors conducting these manipulations. And this is a 150% increase from 2 years ago. In 2017, it was 28 countries. In 2018, 48, and now we have 70. So trajectory of how it's increasing is very visible. And it's only getting worse. Technology is developing, and we still don't really understand, especially in the news business. We don't understand how even us can be manipulated. For example, deep fakes. We are talking about it, that there is technology that can they can take your voice, they can take your video and put words in your mouth that they never left your mouth. But it's incredible. It's very credible the way you look at it, and as time goes by, it's going to get even more credible as technology develops. And we can have it in our pockets. Everybody can do that. So keeping track of that and sort of staying on top of that would be extremely complicated as time goes by. So the point that I would like to argue is that you cannot stop fake news, disinformation, propaganda, manipulation. It happens every day. It will continue to happen. But what we need to do is to somehow mitigate the effects of it. We need to have a society-wide approach. Only media cannot fix this. Media would not sort of self-censor as much as like the global society may want media to do it, because we do depend on clicks, we do depend on sensation, and we do need this engagement from our audiences. But if there is a combined effort from the government actors, from the civil society and media combined, we can we can change something. Media literacy is a very, very important thing in this. And in some cases, there are times when to find out if something's really true, you need to search in different places, in different languages. And not every journalist has time or discipline or dedication to the profession to do that. Unless we train journalists in a way that they are really true to their profession and take the responsibility seriously, I think it would be difficult to manage the problem. Unless the governments have an approach which has, which provides education to not only to the journalists but to overall society, so people understand if something's too sensational, maybe it's not true. And in some of the European countries, the Nordic countries, they have media literacy, very successful classes. Some of the US states, not on the government level, on the federal level, but on the state level, there are some programs that the schools are implementing. For example, in Minnesota, there is a very successful program of media literacy, how children can actually detect the fake news. But it's staggering to me that 75% of Americans cannot distinguish fake news, fake headline from a fact-based headline, and that's incredible. So media literacy from the government's perspective, journalistic dedication, and putting it into every journalist that they are a responsible party in making societies safer, and safer is just one of the things that we need to do. And a third one would be to just generate some sort of public, I want to say outrage, but that would not be the right word to use in this case. But society is not interested in being deceived, manipulated, lied to. Every time there is an outbreak of a disease, people get outraged. People want from the governments to do certain things. Every time there is increasing crime, people want people to do things for them to make societies more secure. But there is not enough literacy or acknowledgement of the fact that disinformation is costing us. And the main thing that it's costing us is it's altering our reality. We don't understand. We lose, just much like this panel is basically summarized at the beginning. It's altering our reality. And when our reality is altered, we don't recognize, we don't see facts, we don't know facts, and we make bad decisions, ill-informed decisions. That's how we elect our leaders. If you elect somebody that you want to govern you, and you're making that choice on wrong facts or lies, then you're not making the right choice. So those are the problems that from the journalist perspective, and that's how I see that we can slow it down.
Now we'll go to Mr. Gaidrius Sakalauskas, the expert in countering disinformation and leader of the online resistance movement, Baltic Elves. So I know that you are talking about the positive agenda and positive approaches, how to solve these problems which we are facing regarding the disinformation. And please, floor is yours, and 10 minutes for you.
Okay, I think for me, 5 minutes will be enough. I prefer to discuss, not to talk monologues. I am Lithuanian elf. The first rule of the elves tells that elves do not exist. And I am exception which proves that elves do not exist. If you do not know about elves, I have just a couple of words about elves. This phenomenon was born 5 years ago in Lithuania, when Russia invaded Ukraine. and it was time to do something. And we started from the very simple things, just to put positive comments on the news portals, because, you know, it was any positive article about Lithuania, NATO, or European Union was followed by the hundreds of the comments produced by the toxic trolls or just simply useful idiots. And we've been quite a long time on the defense. It means we've debunking, troll hunting, monitoring, reporting, but then we realized that being on defense is impossible to win the war. And I think my message is that we have to stop play. I'm calling Kremlin's ping pong. They're throwing for us fake news, lies. For example, they're calling us fascists. We try to say, no, we're not fascists. They're saying you're occupied by the NATO. No, we're not occupied by the NATO. I think it's time to tell our narratives, own positive stories, our success stories. Like my country, 25 years ago, the experts they were saying that Lithuania will reach level of the European Union in 75 years. Now it's 25 years, and we're doing 80% of the European GDP. It's a real success story, and I think it's just drop it out that fake news coming from Russia that we failing country. We're not failing country. We're real success, and for your country, for Sakartvelo, I think it's a lot of nice arguments to tell on stories. I think it's one of the strongest country with a nice narrative. It's birthplace of the wine, oldest Christianity, beautiful nature and cuisine. Tell your stories. Just forget about what Eastern neighbors start telling about that. That's shortly. That's it.